So we're going to go 6 through 8. Let's go there. Chapter 6 through 8, book 1. I think I can move this and make this a little bigger. Yeah. All right. Might be as big as I can make it. All right, that should be good. This is very important stuff, so follow through with me here. We'll get through these readings and we'll talk more about it, but this is good stuff. I think you'll really enjoy this, and you'll see why, in addition to what I've already presented, why I think this period of time now, in the early 4th century, with the first Edict of Toleration and the coming of Constantine, that we have a dramatic shift and change from the multi-beast in terms of persecution of the woman to something totally different. But that, just like Revelation 11 through 13 says, honors the first beast and makes everyone worship it and sets up an image, as you're going to see, while acting like a lamb, in spite of being a dragon. Okay, let's get to chapters, this is 6 right here. So here's how Eusebius is describing Constantine, okay? Listen to this. Thus, like a faithful and good servant, did he act and testify openly, declaring and confessing himself the obedient minister of the supreme king. And God forthwith rewarded him by making him ruler and sovereign. This is how the early Christians in the 4th century were looking at Constantine, okay? This is a personal biographer. And I don't think he gets everything right, as you're going to see with respect to the things that Constantine says. Well, he may be telling what Constantine told him, but what Constantine later tells Eusebius is not what the earliest evidence indicates. And Eusebius going on about praising Constantine. God forthwith rewarded him by making him ruler and sovereign, and victorious to such a degree that he alone, of all rulers, pursued a continual course of conquest, unsubdued and invincible, and through his trophies a greater ruler than tradition records ever to have been before. So dear was he to God, and so blessed, so pious, and so fortunate in all that he undertook, that with the greatest facility he obtained the authority over more nations than any who had preceded him, and yet retained his power undisturbed to the very close of his life. Ancient history describes Cyrus, king of the Persians, as by far the most illustrious of all kings. This is Eusebius, 4th century, writing about Constantine. And yet, if we regard the end of his days, referring to Cyrus, we find it but little corresponded with his past prosperity, since he met with an inglorious and dishonorable death at the hands of a woman. Again, the sons of Greece celebrate Alexander the Macedonian as the conqueror of many diverse nations. Yet we find that he was removed by an early death, before he had reached maturity, being carried off by the effects of revelry and drunkenness. His whole life embraced but the space of 32 years, and his reign extended to no more than a third part of that period. Unsparing as the thunderbolt, he advanced through streams of blood and reduced entire nations and cities, young and old, to utter slavery, talking about Alexander the Great. They're comparing him with Constantine. But when he, Alexander, had scarcely arrived at the maturity of his life and was lamenting the loss of youthful pleasures, death fell upon him with terrible stroke, and that he might not longer outrage the human race, cut him off in a foreign and hostile land, childless, without successor, homeless. Alexander's kingdom was instantly dismembered, each of his officers taking away and apportioning a portion for himself. And yet this man is extolled for such deeds as these. But our emperor, Constantine, began his reign at the time of life at which the Macedonian died, yet doubled the length of his life, and trebled the length of his reign. And instructing his army in the mild and sober precepts of godliness, he carried his arms as far as the Britons, and the nations that dwell in the very bosom of the Western Ocean. He subdued likewise all Scythia, those situated in the remotest north, and divided into numberless, diverse, and barbarous tribes. He even pushed his conquest to the Blemmyans and Ethiopians and the very confines of the south. Nor did he, that is Constantine, think the acquisition of the eastern nations unworthy his care. In short, diffusing the effulgence of his holy light to the ends of the whole world, even to the most distant Indians, the nations dwelling on the extreme circumference of the inhabited earth, he received the submission of all the rulers, governors, and satraps of barbarous nations, who cheerfully welcomed and saluted him, sending embassies and presents and setting the highest value on his acquaintance and friendship. Does that sound like the woman in distress? That this person would bring distress to the woman? Well, if he's a dragon with two horns like a lamb, getting all this prominence and conquering this much, right? Who are all those other ones serving? Alexander, Cyrus, right? Whether or not he was used by Jah or not, because of, again, even the Romans who the dragon controls defy him. Jah can use whoever he wants, and he does use other beings, humans of other nations at times, especially when it relates to his people. But what we're reading here, the praise being heaped on Constantine by Eusebius, right? Let's wrap it up. Insomuch that they honored him with pictures and statues in their respective countries. Constantine alone of all emperors was acknowledged and celebrated by all. Notwithstanding, even among these distant nations, he proclaimed the name of his God and his royal edicts with all boldness. And as we know, these are not, he doesn't use the name of God. He doesn't even think God can have a name, as you're going to see. We'll read later. Like many who have different non-biblical views of God. Does this sound like something that the woman's seed should be worried about? Right? This is like the best possible thing you could imagine, the way Eusebius is describing it, right? This is a greater conqueror than anyone else ever. And everybody loves him. He loves the Christians, or at least is tolerant. Right? This is how Eusebius is writing about him. I'm not seeing any threat whatsoever here. No obvious threat. But we know there is a threat here, isn't there? There's no way the dragon is down here on the earth and things are this good for the woman. Maybe for a little bit. But permanently, in this kind of enduring way where they're now in authority, like the dragon, that's totally different, right? And it's so interesting, so hard. It's such a clever, in my view, strategy. It's almost, I hate to compliment it because it's so evil, but it's so effective. It's like, if you're not aware of what he's doing, then you're just you're gonna underestimate him. But that's all he thinks about, right? That's all he's concerned with is harming the seed of the woman. So everything he would be doing would be geared to that, other than when he's not able to get what he wants, or when he's being blocked in some way, right? But he'd still be trying to do that all the time. So now things are just almost perfect in terms of Rome, right? We go from Rome being this just crazy beast that's going to destroy everything at different periods of time, like you've never seen before that time, to this. Let's go down a few more chapters. Let's read right here. Chapter 26. While therefore, this is Eusebius, Life of Constantine, chapter 26. While therefore Constantine regarded the world as one immense body, and perceived that the head of it all, the royal city of the Roman Empire, was bowed down by the weight of a tyrannous oppression, At first, he had left the task of liberation to those who governed the other divisions of the empire, as being his superiors in point of age. But when none of these proved able to afford relief, and those who had attempted it experienced a disastrous termination of their enterprise, he said that life was without enjoyment to him as long as he saw the imperial city thus afflicted. This is before the supernatural event that Eusebius describes. That earlier part was Eusebius just telling everybody, like getting into his life of Constantine, where he's building up Constantine, all the things that as Christians they see him as. Now he's getting right to the part before Constantine has this alleged supernatural experience. This is Constantine before that experience. So look at this part again. He said that this is Eusebius, Constantine's personal biographer, saying that Constantine said that life was without enjoyment to him as long as he saw the imperial city thus afflicted with divisions, tyrannous oppression, and he prepared himself for the overthrow of the tyranny. So he definitely was concerned about the state of Rome at this time and its divisions and tyrannous rulers. Chapter 27, being convinced, however, that he needed some more powerful aid than his military forces could afford him, on account of the wicked and magical enchantments which were so diligently practiced by the tyrant, he sought divine assistance. He's talking about Maxentius, deeming the possession of arms and a numerous soldiery of secondary importance, but believing the cooperating power of deity invincible and not to be shaken. Constantine considered, therefore, on what God he might rely for protection and assistance. While engaged in this inquiry, the thought occurred to him that of the many emperors who had preceded him, those who had rested their hopes in a multitude of gods and served them with sacrifices and offerings, had in the first place been deceived by flattering predictions and oracles which promised them all prosperity, and at last had met with an unhappy end, while not one of their gods had stood up to warn them of the impending wrath of heaven. While one alone who had pursued an entirely opposite course, who had condemned their error and honored the one supreme God during his whole life, had found him to be the savior and protector of his empire, and the giver of every good thing. Reflecting on this and well weighing the fact that they who had trusted in many gods had also fallen by manifold forms of death, without leaving behind them either family or offspring, stock, name, or memorial, while the God of his father had given him, on the other hand, manifestations of his power in very many tokens. And considering farther that those who had already taken arms against the tyrant and had marched to the battlefield under the protection of a multitude of gods had been slain, reviewing all these considerations, he judged it to be folly to join the idol worship of those who were no gods, and after such convincing evidence to err from the truth, and therefore felt it incumbent upon him to honor his father's God alone, Christian God. 28, accordingly he called on him with earnest prayer and supplications that he would reveal to him who he was, and stretch forth his hand to help him in his present difficulties. And while he was thus praying with fervent entreaty, a most marvelous sign appeared to him from heaven, the account of which it might have been hard to believe had it been related to by any other person. But since the victorious emperor himself long afterwards declared it to the writer of this history, Eusebius, when he was honored with his acquaintance and society, and confirmed his statement by an oath, who could hesitate to accredit the relation, especially since the testimony after time has established its truth? He, that is Constantine, said, this is it, that at about noon, when the day was already beginning to decline, Constantine saw with his own eyes the sign or trophy of a cross of light in the heavens, above the sun, and bearing the inscription, "Conquer by this." At this sight, he himself was struck with amazement, and his whole army also, which followed him on this expedition, and witnessed the miracle. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? He saw the sign of a cross of light in heaven above the sun with the inscription, "Conquer by this," meaning the sign of the cross. What do you think of that? If we accept Eusebius's account, he's telling us that the emperor swore to him by an oath that this is what happened. And this is the latest account, by the way. The earlier two accounts we're going to get to in a moment, they cast some doubt on Constantine's story. And Constantine, as you're going to see, isn't really, well, I'm not saying he was all terrible, right? Especially in one sense, right? But remember, this is the dragon acting like a lamb. You got to look past the lamb part to see the dragon. What did Constantine say? Let's bring it up one more time. I'm going to show you something. I want you to look at the focus on this. This is very important. If we accept what Eusebius says right here, that Constantine saw the sign of a cross of light above the sun with the inscription, "Conquer by this," meaning that sign of the cross. What does that make you think of? Does that make you think of the cross? Or does it make you think of conquer? Why do I ask? Well, there's a very important scripture from our reading, our focus, Revelation 11 through 13. There is an incredibly important scripture that relates to this vision of Constantine. And often people, focus on the cross and whether it was a cross, and we've talked about it, right? But that's not, to me, the main problem. The main problem is that's not how Christians conquer. According to the Bible, even the NIV says triumphed. It's the same word, right? Defeated, conquered, overcome. How does the Bible say Christians conquer? How does it say in all these versions? By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. According to Constantine, he was to conquer by the sign of the cross. It seems different, doesn't it? Why would Jesus appear to Constantine and tell him to conquer by any other means than what the book of Revelation says we conquer by? Right? And it's all throughout Revelation in terms of how we conquer by the blood of the Lamb and by our testimony, by being faithful till death. There's nothing there about conquering in warfare using the sign of a cross. Christians walk by faith, not by sight. It may not be as directly related to Constantine's experience as conquering is, but it sure seems like a lot of faith by sight there outside of the vision, right? I mean, he's literally being told to put an image, use an image to conquer. It seems so different. Well, it's totally different from how we conquer as Christians in Revelation. And the idea of an image that has such a varied history and relates to Jesus' death, right? It's not like the kind of thing you want to go parading around. I mean, Christians do it today, many of them, because they're misled by Constantine in this whole story. They think that's how they just sign the cross. It gives them power. They actually, it empowers them in some way. It becomes almost it is like a relic that they use in their worship. And they don't think it's a problem, but where are you getting this? Again, it's totally different from how we conquer in the Bible, how we walk by faith in the Bible. So I wanted to just make this point now because of the unique aspects of what Constantine allegedly was told in the sign to do, conquer in this sign, than the other two accounts. It's just this account from Eusebius, but that he says he got from the emperor as an oath, right? So I'm sure he's writing down what he was told. But whether or not Constantine's telling the truth, right? Why are we believing people? They're either telling us something true or they're not. They're either acting like they're supposed to be acting according to the truth or they're not. And if they're doing a lot of things that clearly don't line up with what we can see as true in the teachings of Jesus, got to look past the lamb's horns to see the dragon. Now, where are we here? So at this site, right, he sees the sign bearing the inscription, conquer by this, not conquer by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony. No, conquer by the cross. At this site, he himself was struck with amazement, and his whole army also, which followed him on this expedition and witnessed the miracle. Chapter 29, he said, Constantine, that he doubted within himself what the import of this apparition could be. And while he continued to ponder and reason on its meaning, night suddenly came on. Then in his sleep, the Christ of God appeared to him with the same sign which he had seen in the heavens, and commanded him to make a likeness of that sign which he had seen in the heavens, and to use it as a safeguard in all his engagements with his enemies. Right? So this is a whole new direction here, right? This is, according to Constantine, Jesus in heaven instructing him to make a sign of his death instrument and use it as this device, this visual device to protect you. Right? There's nothing in the Bible anywhere, right, about this significance of this sign and using it like as an outward symbol to protect us. Right? That's totally different stuff going on here than anything you see in the Bible. For Christians, right? Chapter 30, at dawn of day he arose, Constantine, and communicated the marvel to his friends. Then calling together the workers in gold and precious stones, he sat in the midst of them and described to them the figure of the sign he had seen, bidding them represent it in gold and precious stones. And this representation I myself have had the opportunity of seeing, Eusebius. He's making this elaborate, extravagant idol or image of what he was told by Jesus to use to protect himself, a spiritual device of his execution instrument being put together with all this extravagance, this image. It was made in the following manner: a long spear overlaid with, I'm sorry, I meant to bring you guys up. I was reading right here. You can read on your own too. It was a brief paragraph where this is where he talked about seeing the sign, chapter 29 here in the life of Constantine. Everything I read to you right there. Last part. Now it was made, talking about the cross that he's having specially made was made in this way: a long spear overlaid with gold formed the figure of the cross by means of a transverse bar laid over it. On top of the whole was fixed a wreath of gold and precious stones, and within this, the symbol of the Savior's name, 2 letters indicating the name of Christ by means of its initial characters. The letter looks like rho, right, because it's a Greek letter, being intersected with chi in its center. And these letters the emperor was in the habit of wearing on his helmet at a later period. From the crossbar of the spear was suspended a cloth, a royal piece covered with a profuse embroidery of most brilliant precious stones, and which, being also richly interlaced with gold, presented an indescribable degree of beauty to the beholder. This banner was of such a square form, and the upright staff, whose lower section was of great length, bore a golden half-length portrait of the pious emperor and his children in its upper part, beneath the trophy of the cross and immediately above the embroidered banner. Where was this told to do, right? Where was Constantine told to do all this to this sign? According to the account of Eusebius, who got it from Constantine, he was told to make the sign of the cross he saw in the heaven, which we'll assume is this Chi-Rho sign he's talking about. Where did all this gold and jewelry and suspended cloth and profuse embroidery and interlaced gold, a half-length portrait of the emperor and his children in the upper part, where did all this come from? I don't think you're following the vision very well, Constantine. Maybe you should have just stuck with what you saw. Is this what you saw? Because this isn't what you described to Eusebius at all. It just seems to go so far beyond what he's talking about. The emperor constantly made use of this sign of salvation as a safeguard against every adverse and hostile power, and commanded that others similar to it should be carried at the head of all his armies. Eusebius, Life of Constantine, chapter 31. All right, now that's Eusebius's account. It's the latest account, but he gets it firsthand, according to him, from the emperor under oath. And even the account that the emperor gives him isn't what they follow, according to what we just read, right? There's all kinds of other things. He's adding even his own image and an image of his children to the sign. So even if he saw it, does this seem faithful to you? It doesn't to me. It seems way beyond what you were told to do, and even including yourself and your children in the sign. That isn't even close to what he was talking about. The sign was only about him, the Christ. So what's all this other stuff going on here? Again, it's all points to suspect things going on here, right? It's all sus. Let's go to Lactantius and the reference we read earlier from the extract, De Mortibus Persecutorum, chapter 44. Check that out. Bring you guys up here. And we saw, of course, that the the words, like literal inscription Constantine allegedly saw, conquer in this sign. So he saw the sign of the Chi-Rho and the words, conquer in this. And that directly contradicts what in the Bible Christians are said to conquer by, right? So this is a whole new directive. It's sus, man. It is suspicious to me. Let me bring you guys up. Lactantius de mortibus persecutorum, on the manner in which the persecutors died. Let's see if I've got the right size here. Let me just take a look here and get a little chips here. Excuse me, get a little hungry sometimes. Excuse me. All right, we just got one section here from Lactantius. This is earlier than Eusebius, okay? But still not the earliest account. All right, 44 right here. And I'm sorry. And now a civil war broke out between Constantine and Maxentius. Although Maxentius kept himself within Rome because the soothsayers had foretold that if he went out of it, he should perish, yet he conducted the military operations by able generals. In forces, he exceeded his adversary, for he had not only his father's army, which deserted from Servius, but also his own, which he had lately drawn together out of Mauritania and Italy. They fought, and the troops of Maxentius prevailed. At length, Constantine was, with a steady courage and a mind prepared for every event, led his whole forces to the neighborhood of Rome and encamped them opposite the Milvian Bridge. The anniversary of the reign of Maxentius approached, that is, the 6th of the calends of November, and the 5th year of his reign was drawing to an end. Constantine was directed in a dream. This is the account of Lactantius, an earlier account than Eusebius. Constantine was directed in a dream to cause the heavenly sign to be delineated on the shields of his soldiers. So to proceed to battle, and so to proceed in battle, or to battle. Constantine did as he had been commanded, and he marked upon their shields the Chi-Rho. It's missing the actual signs here in this online version of the source of Lactantius, with a perpendicular line drawn through it and turned round at the top, basically the sign of the Chi-Rho that Eusebius was talking about, being the cipher of Christ. Having this sign, his troops stood at arms. The enemies advanced, but without their emperor, and they crossed the bridge, the Milvian Bridge. The armies met and fought with utmost exertions of valor, and firmly maintained their ground. In the meantime, a sedition arose at Rome, and Maxentius was relieved as one who had abandoned all concern for the safety of the commonwealth. And suddenly, while he exhibited the Circensian games on the anniversary of his reign, the people cried with one voice, "Constantine cannot be overcome." Dismayed at this, Maxentius burst from the assembly, and having called some senators together, ordered the Sibylline books to be searched. In them, it was found that on the same day the enemy of the Romans should perish. Led by this response to the hopes of victory, he, that is Maxentius, went to the field. The bridge in his rear was broken down. At sight of that, the battle grew hotter. The hand of the Lord prevailed, and the forces of Maxentius were routed. He fled towards the broken bridge, but the multitude pressing on him, he was driven headlong into the Tiber. This destructive war being ended, Constantine was acknowledged as emperor, with great rejoicings by the Senate and people of Rome, and now he came to know the perfidy of Dia, for he found letters written to Maxentius and saw the statues and portraits of two associates which had been set up together. The Senate, in reward of the valor of Constantine, decreed to him the title of Maximus, the greatest, a title which Dia had always arrogated to himself. Dia, when he heard that Constantine was victorious and Rome freed, expressed as much sorrow as if he himself had been vanquished. But afterwards, when he heard the decree of the Senate, he grew outrageous, avowed enmity toward Constantine, and made his title of the greatest a theme of abuse and raillery. So this is Lactantius's account, right? So it doesn't mention a lot of what Eusebius talks about. He just talks about the heavenly sign. He describes it and says they put it on their shields and proceeded in battle. All right, let's look at our last and the earliest account. Bring this up here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to read the article here by Jan Wilhelm Jivers, published in 2021 in the Journal of Late Antiquity. It's called The Panegyricus Latinus, Constantine's Religious Ideology. Journal of Late Antiquity, 14.1, pages 50 through 74, again, 2021. All right. So we're going to read just some select sections of this, okay? Because this is an article about the panegyric, right? So these are public boasts, basically, that are made to glorify the emperor. Earlier, when we read that extract summary, the third example it gave was a panegyric from 310. It was given to Constantine, but it was before his alleged encounter with the heavenly sign that we just read about from Eusebius and Lactantius. So in 310, this panegyric, it associated him with Apollo and all these things, but then he goes through this alleged experience, right? The supernatural experience involving Jesus and the cross and all this stuff. And so we get to a panegyric that's given to Constantine after all these things happen, right? After he's had the experience with the sign in heaven, after he's conquered Maxentius. So in the initial part, talking about the oration in honor of Constantine in Trier by an anonymous orator in 313. I'm going to read you some select sections here. So let's go to page 55, right here. Under divine intervention, historians have used the speech of 313, this panegyric we're talking about, the earliest account describing Constantine's experiences, or Constantine and what happened with him after he allegedly received this sign and revelation and conquered Maxentius. Historians have used the speech of 313 for reconstructing not only Constantine's Italian campaign, but also his religious disposition at the time. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge on 28 October 312, his defeat of Maxentius, and his conquest of Rome are so closely associated by Christian sources with Constantine's dream and or vision as a divine intervention by the Christian God, and by modern scholars with the so-called Constantine shift, that is Constantine's conversion to the Christian faith. Around 315, the association was implicitly made for the first time by Lactantius, what we just read, okay? Who referred to a dream of Constantine in which he received the advice to mark the heavenly sign. Remember we read about that? of the god on the shields of his soldiers before going into battle. This sign is commonly understood as the Chi-Rho symbol, or the Christogram, turned in such a way that it looks like a cross. Hence, it's also interpreted as a staurogram. Remarkably, the sources are silent for more than 20 years until Eusebius in his life of Constantine, right? So he's saying Lactantius, right? So the panegyric that we're focused on right here was in 313, after all the visions and things and the defeat of Maxentius. The panegyric we're going to focus on here was in 313. Lactantius, around 315, described Constantine's experience as receiving the heavenly sign that they would put on the shields and go out in battle. But then 20 years after that, right, around 325, 324, 25, that's when Eusebius, he says, for more than 20 years after Lactantius, which was published even later in 337, included an elaborate account of Constantine's vision of a celestial cross with the text, not mentioned by Lactantius, by this conquer. This vision was accompanied in Eusebius's account by a subsequent dream in which Christ appeared to Constantine. Another difference between Eusebius's account and Lactantius and the panegyric that we're going to read, or part of it we're studying. Couldn't find the entire panegyric, just parts of it in this article, but they're enough to make our point. We don't need to see the whole thing. The vision in Eusebius's account had Christ appear to Constantine, urging him to make a copy of the heavenly sign and use it in battle against Maxentius. This symbol typically is considered to have been the labarium. Eusebius's vision narrative differs from the banner, right? The conquer in this is what a labarium is. Labarium. Eusebius's vision narrative differs from Lactantius's dream story with regard not only to content but also to timing. While Lactantius places Constantine's dream immediately before the decisive battle at the Milvian Bridge, Eusebius situates the vision at a distinct time and place, either before or during the campaign. As to the sources for these Christian accounts, Eusebius explicitly mentions that he heard the story from Constantine himself, who had confirmed it with oaths. Although this eyewitness report from the main person involved was given more than 30 years after the event, Eusebius saw no reason to doubt Constantine's account. Nevertheless, Eusebius's record has become the canonical source of the vision. In contrast to Eusebius's apparent reliance on the account of Constantine himself, it is hard to say what Lactantius's source was. Possibly he had seen the Christogram, staurogram on the shields of returned soldiers in Trier, where he was teaching Constantine's son, Crispus. Or he may have heard informers at court, or heard the story from participants in the campaign. Both Lactantius, let's go to, right, so that's explaining more about the source of Lactantius, highlighting the differences between Eusebius and Lactantius's version of events. Eusebius's version is 30 years after the actual events. Lactantius's is much closer, and there are significant differences. So if we jump down to 59, let's read here. Constantine is said to be in direct communication with this, according to the panegyric. The 313 panegyric, our earliest source of what happened. The public oration that was given to Constantine. Constantine is said to be in direct communication with this supreme deity. But which deity is it? He may have been Jupiter. The order, after all, refers to the divinity's thunderbolt. And then you can see in footnote 37, here's part of the panegyric given to Constantine in 313. as that God, creator and master of the world, sends messages now sad, now glad, with his same thunderbolt. But Sol Invictus and Apollo are also possible candidates. It is very unlikely that the order refers to the Christian God, since he remarks that the supreme deity delegates to lesser gods. Trinitarians! What's going on here? Constantine's being given a panegyric in 313 after receiving the sign of the cross, seeing Jesus in a dream, being told, conquer in this sign. He's now being given a panegyric after conquering Maxentius and all of it that refers to lesser gods. Footnote 39, let's look at the panegyric and what it actually says. Here's the Latin translation. You must share some. This is a public oration being given to Constantine after all that happened. You must share some secret with that divine mind, Constantine, which has delegated care for us to lesser gods and deigns to reveal itself to you alone. This is clearly polytheistic and possibly a reference to the Neoplatonic single unifying principle, and would be unacceptable to Christians, and hence to Constantine if he were a Christian at that time. He received a vision. He was told to do things by Christ himself. In much modern literature, Constantine's religious position at this time is generally labeled as already being monotheistic. However, I would prefer to characterize his position as henotheistic, or as softly monotheistic, since there are no indications that he turned away from the traditional Roman cults. Page 61. Let's keep going. We're almost done. In the same year as Lactantius wrote his short account, only 3 years after his victory over Maxentius, Constantine's triumphal arch in Rome was inaugurated in the presence of the emperor during the celebrations for his Decinalia in Rome in 315. The reliefs on the arch refer not in any way to Christianity, let alone to a vision or dream. Instead, the pre-Constantinian reliefs show, among other things, sacrificial acts and depictions of Luna and Sol, the sun and moon. If he had this experience with Jesus, he saw the sign of the cross, like he told Eusebius, over the sun, and a banner with the words, in this sign conquer, and then was visited by Jesus in the dream right after that. I think that would be probably the only thing on your mind, wouldn't you? And yet, he's got panegyrics being said to him about lesser gods being involved. He's erecting an arch several years after all these events allegedly happened and his victory over Maxentius that don't refer in any way to Christianity, but instead depict things that are abhorrent to Christianity. Everybody, does this seem strange to you? This is crazy. This so much strikes me as what we read in Revelation 11 through 13. From the beast, from the water to the beast to the dragon with two horns like a lamb. I mean, it's just all staring us right in the face from history, in vivid detail even. The original band depicting Constantine's Italian campaign, talking about the arch we're going to look at in a minute, also makes no allusions to Christianity. Instead, the divinities that are depicted are Victoria and Sol Invictus, as has been made convincingly clear by Noel Lenski. The references to Sol are overwhelming. The sun, not only on the arch itself, but also in the environmental setting of the arch. The arch was built in such a way that it made a topographical and visual connection with the colossal statue of Sol standing close to it. Moreover, within a short distance of the arch was the temple of Sol Invictus, built several decades earlier by the Emperor Aurelian. There's been considerable discussion about the arch's inscription. Where was I going to take that part to? Oh, yeah. So we'll move down just to a little bit past that part. He starts talking about more about this, right? About the setting of the Arch of Constantine and its relationship to Sol Invictus. He starts talking about all the different references to Apollo and Sol in Constantine's reign. But then he gets down to, if we skip just some of the information, that he's talking about different scholars and their view of these events. And he compares it with Eusebius and his account and some of the things he says. But then on page 65, right here, he starts talking about the Labarum, the banner that Constantine allegedly saw, that it says in this sign, conquer in this sign. He says that only began to be seen on coins from 327. Constantine's coins show a remarkable continuity when it comes to Constantine's association with the solar god. While Sol was already prominent on Constantinian coinage in the period from 306 to 312, 169 of 749 coins, the importance of Sol, sun, increased from 313 to 324, right after all of these events allegedly involving his experience with Jesus. They go from 22.5% to Sol to 35%. 331 of 959 Constantine coins have a religious association with the solar deity, including a long run of Soli Invicto Committee coins. It appears, therefore, that Sol Invictus after 312 remained Constantine's favorite deity and may have even become more significant in the emperor's religious principles. And let's see. Based on coinage, there is therefore remarkable continuity and consistency in Constantine's and the empire's religious ideology. And 312 does not seem to have been a turning point in his official religious convictions, in spite of all those miracles. This is not to say that Constantine cannot have had a personal sympathy for the Christian God, but he definitely did not openly declare himself a Christian or provide an official definition of his own religious position. And it's so interesting, right? He allegedly had this vision, this special vision that the panegyric doesn't mention. Lactantius mentions far differently than Eusebius. And then we get this arch, no mention of Christianity. We get this increase in coins to the sun, Sol Invictus. Nor did Constantine, make Christianity part of the official state ideology at this point. After 324, Sol remained a prominent deity for Constantine, as appears not only from coinage, but also from statues of Constantine as Sol Helios, or with solar attributes in the eastern part of the empire. The most famous example, of course, being the statue on the porphyry column of Constantine's Forum in Constantinople. Right, we're going to look at those in a second. We've seen before his giant images and the arch. But he's got idols of himself as Sol, the sun god, after 324. So we have increased in coins to the sun god. We have no open acceptance of Christianity as his own religious position. Right? For over a decade after the alleged supernatural experience involving Jesus, the sign in heaven, conquer by this, even though the Bible says you conquer by the blood of the Lamb, by your testimony. It's all so strange, everybody. And yet we have Rome, this beast, turning into something totally different with all these false god associations. But it's got these two horns like a lamb. And everyone keeps looking at those horns like a lamb, being nice to the Christians, bringing them in so that you can what? Dragonize them, paganize them. Because everything sure changed after this, didn't it? Doctrinally, the name of God, the authority of the church, and as we read earlier from Schaff, and we'll read in our final part more next week, part 45, how the church just continued to abuse people with the authority of the first beast. Didn't change as much as it seemed like it changed. It changed in one important respect, didn't it? It grew two horns like a lamb. That was a big change. It made a big difference. It's still this dragon. It's still fake. It's the strategy of the dragon. He's fighting a war. And he's doing it in the way he knows best. So we got to see this. We were told this. We were given these visions, these revelations, these signs and symbols, so that we would understand what happened and what's happening to the extent that God allows us to. And I think we can see things fairly clearly from a historical point of view, in light of all the things we've read and discussed. Now, let's take a look we're getting to our last point. This is our last reading from this article. Right here, from Conversion, page 66. It's our last part from this article, okay? Then I'm going to show you some pictures. We're going to partake. Done. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope it's been worth it. Many scholars date Constantine's personal conversion to the eve of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in connection with the dream and/or vision. Despite the fact that Lactantius and Eusebius do not mention Constantine's conversion in their descriptions of the events before the battle or thereafter, even a decade after, he's still promoting the worship of the sun god, everyone. They think he's fully converted. Most people I talk to, Trinitarians, not even close. The details that he gives through Eusebius later, not even close to Lactantius earlier, and even earlier, the panegyric, which has references to non-Christian gods all over the place, and is consistent with the arch that he erects in that same year or a couple years later, with no mention of Christianity, including on the ban dealing with the Italian campaign, where he allegedly had this vision, allegedly saw these divinely inspired words inscribed in a banner over the sun. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit. It looks like he later embellished it to be consistent with what he wanted people to see him as, versus what actually happened earlier during the actual events that brought him to power. And thereafter, the term conversion suggests suddenness. However, in most cases, conversion was not a Pauline momentary change of view, but a more gradual process taking place over a period of time in defining a new religious identity. Now, if he had had that supernatural vision, right? He saw Jesus in a dream, was told in a vision with a sign and actual divinely inspired words what to do, and he did it, and it worked, and it's still a gradual process where you're even promoting the sun god more than ever. No. And the earlier accounts don't describe what you later say happened. That's inconsistent with all of that. And the thing you're told in the divinely inspired inscription in heaven contradicts what the book of Revelation says the seed of the woman would conquer doing. None of it makes sense. There's recently been convincingly argued, well, it's got the mark of the dragon, right? He's got the horns like a lamb. It confuses people. Constantine's transition to Christianity was a long and slow process and not a single sublime moment. a 180-degree turn from one set of beliefs to another. I guarantee you, if he had a vision like he described later through Eusebius, that's exactly what it would have been. Just like Paul. Yeah, it would have been just like that. He even got more than Paul did, or at least the same, right? But he was given something he said would protect him in all his engagements. So, yeah, I think I would have made a wholesale change right there, right? I got divine protection. I used this science. Yeah, no confusion. I'm good. It would have been pretty quick, but it wasn't, because that's not what happened. Over a long period of years, Constantine became familiar with Christian beliefs and customs and steadily became Christian himself. This developing conversion only was completed by his baptism on his deathbed in 337. Okay, so he took over 20 years before he even got baptized after this alleged supernatural experience that brought him to power. It is perhaps telling that Libanius reports that Constantine, only after the defeat of Licinius in 324, thought it to his own advantage to recognize some other as God, right? So he wasn't even thinking he had to do that until 324. And he had the vision allegedly in like 312, 313. Moreover, social scientists have made clear that it is naive to think that conversion narratives are accounts of what really happened. Constantine's explanation of his encounter with the Christian God by way of the dream and vision, as told by Lactantius and Eusebius, is a paradigm by which the emperor shaped his life and religious transformation in hindsight. I think the facts show that's clearly what happened. It's not what he later says through Eusebius is not consistent with what else is said to have happened by multiple sources. His supposed religious experience before the battle at the Milvian Bridge was not a real experience, but the testimonial account of an interpreted experience of spiritual transformation and the re-examination of his own life in the form of public representation. Hence, the account in Eusebius' life of Constantine of the emperor's vision and his transformation into a Christian hero has no, or its very best, very little historical validity. The thing is, everybody, I think that is accurate, basically what he said. I just can't reconcile the things Constantine says through Eusebius in the latest account of what happened with the God of the Bible or Jesus. None of the earlier accounts and Constantine's own behavior through at least 324, where he starts to realize, according to Libanius, that, he's got to make someone else his God. He doesn't get baptized till 337. The promotion of the sun god is increasing. None of this is consistent with his later description of what happened to Eusebius. What he said he saw in heaven isn't consistent with what John wrote down that is the way Christians conquer. It's not by the sign of the cross. And that kind of conquering was fighting in wars. Our conquering as Christians is by living and dying faithful, the way Christians did all through the period of the wild beast, the multi-beast, until it turned into this dragon with two horns like a lamb and changed its approach to the seed of the woman so it could actually start deceiving them. Instead of having them die faithful, even though he was getting them, in many cases, to not do that, the better approach with the continuous growth and nonstop spread of the seed of the woman was to become the seed of the woman, to become that very thing that the people trying to serve God want to be, so that you're right there with them to stop them. Just like he did with the Jews in ancient times. That's why they got so bad, right? Because the devil was right there trying to stop and disrupt everything. Just like in Zechariah, right? When the angel of the Lord came to speak with Zechariah, and Satan was right there. He went to Joshua, the high priest, Satan was right there, trying to accuse him. Tell him he's got dirty, he's dirty. He's dirty. What did the angel of the Lord say? put new clothes on him. I'll tell you who's dirty and who's not. And I guarantee you he made that very clear when he threw him out of heaven. And now we've got the dragon doing the same thing all over again that he did with the Jews. Tries to become that thing and taint it from within so that the very people trying to win lose. Because he gets us to put our faith in the wrong thing. And next week, we're going to talk more about what it is that through the rise of Constantine and the transformation of the Roman state and religion into this dragon with two horns like a lamb from a wild multi-beast beast. Next week, in number 45, we're going to talk about some of the things the dragon, through the rise of Constantine, has been able to use to deceive Christians, which is what the dragon's trying to do to win this war. So I encourage you to join me next week as we wrap up this series, recover parts of this time period of Constantine, the Council of Nicaea a little bit more, and then on through to the end of the 4th century, where I think we'll make it clear that by this point, the dragon is in full control. Just like Eusebius described with Constantine in the opening descriptions of the life of Constantine. This is how they see him. This is what he became to the Christians in a way that I believe deceived them, made them forget how you really conquer. And they started to follow Constantine in his vision and what he was told and what he told people about the metaphysic of God at the Council of Nicaea. It's totally different than what Christians had known to that point. Even Christians that might have had a sort of Trinitarian thinking, not fully developed, but not even close to what was to come. So I hope you'll join me next week for that. Let me show you, though, before we go, the arch and idols of Constantine. Now, we've talked about these before, or shown them and talked about them. But I just wanted to show you, right, because as you read, right, after this experience that he allegedly had, right, this supernatural experience, contrast him with Paul, right? There's no similarity at all. Could you imagine Paul going back and denying, doing things that are, against what he's now learning? Well, Constantine did all kinds of stuff like that. He erected this arch with no mention of Christianity. After all this supernatural experience allegedly happened and secured him victory, he doesn't even mention it. And he instead mentions and begins to promote more fully than ever before the sun god, the moon god, and all the lesser deities of Rome. We'll bring it up here. So when we read in Revelation, as we've read, 11 through 13, how this second beast, like a dragon, would set up an image like the first beast, the multi-beast beast, and get all the people to worship it. You see, there's a very close association, both in identity and in concern, right? The dragon with horns like a lamb wants people to keep worshiping the first beast, but it's a different beast. That's exactly what we just read about. There's a whole new beast in Constantine that's now got horns like a lamb, but it's still pointing everyone back to the multi-beast beast and all of its gods, and even sets up an image in honor of those gods, exactly like Revelation told us it would do. This is Constantine's arch, right? This is something he set up after allegedly being given a vision, right? Being shown how he would conquer. A little blurry image. Let me see if I can get a better image here. Well, that seems so blurry. And then I have this here. Let me see. want to try to get a big screen image here for you guys. But as you can see, this is not a small thing, okay? This is what Constantine erected. You guys don't hear about this a lot because the Trinitarians don't want to bring it up. It doesn't have anything to support what they say about Constantine during this time. And it has everything to support what we're saying. It's like living proof. This guy was not a Christian. He was a worshiper of false gods. His story about this vision and conquering this sign, that's later, decades later, clearly embellished based on what he was actually doing at that time, making gigantic arches, promoting false gods, increasing the coinage in support of these false gods. So if you haven't looked at this, you can, look at it on your own. It's okay. I finally got it big enough to where I want to show you guys. Okay. So as you can see, this is Constantine's arch. Now, some of these figures at the top are false gods, depictions of gods, like in these little images and frames here. Down here, these are all images of Roman pagan deities. Okay? This is what I believe the Bible's talking about when it says that the dragon with two horns like a lamb, right? It's got he's showing sacrificial offerings on here. Everything, everybody. This is after he was given the vision. After he saw the words, after he conquered and became emperor. He did all these things. And if we just look for Constantine, right? Just type in Constantine, well, I'm going to bring up stuff. Constantine's giant idols. That'll do it, right? So, everybody, he made a giant, these are huge idols of himself as the sun god. And this is just the head part. It's just the hand part. So here you can see there's the foot, or on the far right piece, there's another foot. In the middle, piece of the hand is on the far left here, one of his biceps, and then his face here. So this guy was an idolater, a false god worshiper. He appears to have lied about a divine vision and the means by which Christians conquer. He changed it from conquering by giving your life to conquering by taking the lives of others, with the sign of the instrument on which Jesus was killed. None of this makes any sense in terms of actually seeing him as some divine figure appointed by Jesus to tell us about the Trinity and give us this sign in which to conquer, which he then, gives all the credit to these false gods. And doesn't even mention Christianity anywhere on this arch. He doesn't even decide he needs to make the Christian God his God until 324, apparently. And didn't even get baptized until 337. Trying to bring up some images that'll actually load and not take us to an article that's retarded like this. And we got to go through a ton of stuff just to see an image. So you guys can see though, right? You can all see you got coins, statues. This is not someone who's a Christian, right? And this is a guy who makes arches celebrating false gods. Exactly as the book of Revelation said the dragon would do. Let's just read it real briefly, that part right there, to keep it fresh in mind. Since we are now at the point where I believe this was fulfilled, that this coming of Constantine, after the multi-beast, looks like a lamb, but it's not. It's a dragon. And this dragon has a special relationship with the multi-beast. It's very concerned about how people view it. And this is what it says about that beast. Revelation 13:12. 13:11. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf. Okay, so whatever the authority of the first beast had, this second beast has. That's exactly what we see with Constantine coming to power, transforming the beast, but with the same authority. And made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, the arch, the victorious arch of Constantine, not to honor anything to do with Christianity. It is totally 100% an image and an honor to the first beast. And it's going to perform great signs, as I'll discuss next week. Performs great signs on behalf of the first beast. Ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded, the first beast. The arch of Constantine fits this perfectly and gives honor and glory back to that wild beast with the sword stroke head that got wounded. It gives it honor back after it has been wounded and healed. It's restoring honor to the first beast, this new beast, this dragon with horns like a lamb. Even though it looks like a lamb, it's still pointing back to the first beast and setting up an image for everybody to worship the first beast, not the lamb. It wants you to conquer in the sign of that which killed the lamb. When Christians are to conquer in the blood of the lamb.